Have you ever heard a situation where the mother of a huge celebrity was turned away from first class? Picture this. A woman, proud and confident, steps onto a luxurious plane, expecting a smooth, first-class flight. But instead, she's told there's no room for her, and she's left stunned and confused. Here's where it gets mind-blowing. This woman had no idea that her son owned the airline that just denied her. I know, you're probably thinking, how could this happen? Stay with me, because the twist you never saw coming is about to unfold. In this story, you're going to discover the shocking details of how this legendary moment went down, the hidden truths behind the scenes, and why it all went unnoticed by someone who should have known better. I'm sure you're curious about how this could happen, and trust me, I'm going to reveal everything. This is a tale of fame, fortune, and family secrets that you won't believe until you hear the full story. Keep watching, because by the end of this video, you'll get the full scoop. Trust me, you won't want to miss the jaw-dropping truth behind what really happened. So, stay tuned. You're about to get answers to questions you never even knew you had. That fateful day started like any other for a woman who never thought she'd have to confront something like this. She had always lived in the shadow of her son's success, but her life was defined by being proud of the man he had become. She'd raised him through the struggles of humble beginnings, and now, after all the years, she found herself standing at the entrance of a world she had never been fully a part of, the world of wealth, of luxury, and of recognition. Her son had reached the kind of stardom that most people could only dream of, and as his mother, she had always been by his side. From the early days when his career was just beginning to take off, she'd been his biggest supporter, his rock. Even if she didn't always understand the celebrity world he was thrust into. But this time, something was different. This wasn't just another routine trip. This was a moment that would change everything. She walked through the airport, the familiar hum of voices and the rush of people blending into the background as she made her way to the airline counter. As she checked in, everything seemed normal at first. She didn't expect anything extraordinary. After all, it wasn't her first time flying, and it certainly wasn't her first time flying first class. She had been treated to luxury many times over the years, mostly thanks to her son's incredible rise to fame. But this time, the usual excitement felt different. There was an odd sense of foreboding, something in the air that she couldn't quite place. As she approached the gate and presented her ticket, the attendant's expression shifted. A subtle change, but it was enough to make her heart skip a beat. The attendant looked at her ticket, then glanced up at her, and then back at the ticket again. It was a look that sent a chill down her spine, but she couldn't understand why. She was used to people being starstruck when they realized who she was. But this was different. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it seems there's been an issue with your seating," the attendant said, her voice unervingly polite. "We don't have a first-class seat available for you." It didn't make sense. She was supposed to have a first-class seat. She had paid for it, and she had never had any problems in the past. Yet, here she was, standing in front of an attendant who was telling her that she would have to be seated elsewhere. She tried to keep her composure, thinking it was just a simple mistake. But as the conversation progressed, it became clear that it wasn't. The attendant seemed unbothered, even as she offered no solutions, no options for moving forward. Something was off. She couldn't understand why this was happening. As she was escorted to a different section of the plane, the realization began to settle in. She was being treated like just another passenger. Like she wasn't someone important, like she didn't have the privilege of being the mother of one of the biggest stars on the planet. The very idea that she, of all people, would be turned away from a first-class seat seemed absurd. But there was more to this than met the eye. The nagging feeling at the back of her mind grew stronger with every passing minute. She wasn't just a mother traveling to see her son. There was something deeper at play here, something she hadn't yet figured out. Little did she know, her son had long since moved beyond being a mere celebrity. He had taken on a role that was far more complex, far more powerful than she had ever imagined. He had become the owner of an airline, and not just any airline. He was the driving force behind one of the most successful and innovative carriers in the industry. Yet, she was still unaware of this. How could she not know? How had she missed this monumental part of his life? How had he kept this from her? The answer to that question wasn't simple. Her son's rise to prominence had been swift and unpredictable. He'd gone from being a rising star in the entertainment world to becoming an influential figure in the business world. His music career, his brand, his global influence had all played a part in his growing empire. But what she didn't know was how deeply involved he had become in the airline industry, an industry that was known for its power, its prestige, and its secrets. As she sat there, trying to process what had just happened, a sense of unease began to build. How could she have missed something so important? Why had he kept this from her? And more importantly, why was she being treated like this? Was it some sort of test? Or was there something more sinister going on? The questions kept piling up, and with each passing minute, the mystery deepened. This wasn't just about a mother being turned away from first class. This was about something far bigger, something that would shake the very foundations of their relationship. The tension between them had always been palpable, but this moment felt different. It felt like the beginning of something much darker. Behind the scenes, her son was grappling with his own set of problems. As the owner of the airline, he had become entangled in a web of corporate politics, rivalries, and shady deals that threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. The airline, which had once been a symbol of his success, was now facing financial instability, and his business partners were growing restless. The pressure was mounting, and as the stakes grew higher, the secrecy around his ownership of the airline intensified. He knew that revealing his involvement in the airline would put him at risk, not just in terms of his business empire, but also in his relationship with his family. He had kept the truth hidden for so long because he feared what might happen if his mother or anyone else found out. Meanwhile, in the heart of the airline's operations, there were whispers of a possible takeover, of new leadership taking control, of people with ulterior motives trying to exploit the situation for their own gain. The situation was deteriorating, and his carefully curated world was beginning to crumble. Every decision he made had far-reaching consequences, and every move was being watched by those who sought to profit from his downfall. But the truth had a way of coming to light, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. And now, his mother was unknowingly at the center of this unraveling story. She had been treated like just another passenger, unaware of the enormous truth that her son's airline ownership represented. She didn't know that the very airline she was flying on was the one her son had built from the ground up. She didn't know that the person who had just turned her away from first class was working for her son. As the tension between them grew, so did the mystery surrounding the airline. Who was pulling the strings behind the scenes? What did they want from him? And why had his mother been kept in the dark for so long? These were questions that would eventually lead to an explosive revelation that would change everything. But for now, all she could do was sit in the back of the plane, try and make sense of what had just happened. She didn't know it yet, but the answers she was searching for were closer than she could ever imagine. And when the truth finally came to light, it would shake her to her very core. The plane soared through the skies, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. The questions lingered in the air, unanswered and unresolved. But soon, the answers would come, and when they did, everything would change. The days after that plane ride were the beginning of something far greater, something that neither she nor her son could have ever foreseen. Her mind raced as the incident continued to linger like a shadow, never fully disappearing, always leaving her unsettled. She couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play, something far more complex than a simple case of poor customer service or mix-up with seating arrangements. There were too many questions, too many strange occurrences for this to just be a coincidence. Her son, the man she had always known, was now at the center of something huge, a storm she couldn't yet comprehend. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she hadn't just been turned away from first class because of a minor error. This was part of something much bigger. Something far darker was unfolding behind the scenes, and she was in the middle of it, whether she liked it or not. In the weeks that followed, she began to notice more unsettling details. A strange phone call from an unfamiliar voice. Someone from the airline's management had left a cryptic message on her voicemail. It wasn't clear who the person was or what they wanted, but the tone of their voice, the way they kept mentioning company secrets, sent chills down her spine. They were trying to say something, but the message was cut off before it could go anywhere substantial. That was the first sign. The second sign came when she accidentally overheard a conversation between two airline executives in a coffee shop. They were talking about a plan that was supposed to take place soon, but the specifics were vague. She didn't want to pry, but she couldn't help overhearing the words, the mother of Big Shaq, being mentioned. They were talking about her. But why? And what were they planning? As the pieces slowly began to fit together in her mind, she started to uncover the truth she had been too blind to see. The airline was struggling, far more than anyone had led her to believe. Her son had poured everything into it, but even he couldn't control the forces that were now working against him. His once promising empire was now teetering on the edge of disaster. Yet, despite all the danger, he continued to keep things hidden from her. Why had he done that? Why had he kept her in the dark? What was he afraid of? Her frustration grew with each unanswered question. She wasn't just a bystander in this story. She was a key player, and yet no one had told her the full truth. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that this wasn't just about a mother being turned away from a luxury flight. It was about betrayal, trust, and the unspoken lies that ran through the very heart of their family. There was something else, a missing piece to the puzzle that she couldn't quite identify. She decided it was time to confront her son, to finally get the answers she so desperately needed. But when she tried to reach out, she was met with resistance. His team, his staff, everyone around her began to act strangely. They were evasive, unwilling to give her any straight answers. It was as if they were all part of some secret, one that she wasn't allowed to know about. She felt like an outsider in her own family, and the realization hit her hard. Her son had changed, and not for the better. Meanwhile, her son's situation had only grown more complicated. His control over the airline was slipping away. The rival executives, those who had been quietly working in the background, were starting to make their move. There were whispers of a corporate takeover, but it wasn't just any ordinary takeover. It was a hostile one. The people behind it weren't interested in just taking over the company. They wanted to erase him entirely. He had built the airline from the ground up, but now all of that was at risk. The people who had once been his allies were now his enemies. They saw him as a threat, someone who could expose their dirty secrets, and they would stop at nothing to make sure he was out of the picture. As the pressure mounted, he began to crack. His decisions became erratic, his trust in those around him diminished, and he found himself walking a fine line between holding on to everything he had worked for and losing it all. But the real twist came when she found herself in a situation that no one could have predicted. One night, as she was leaving a meeting with a few airline executives, she was approached by someone she thought she could trust. It was an old family friend, someone who had always been close to her son, and who had played a key role in his rise to fame. This person had always been by their side, a constant presence in their lives, offering support and guidance. But that night, the man spoke with strange urgency, almost as if he'd been waiting for this moment for years. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There's more at stake here than you realize. It's not just about your son. It's about the entire future of the airline. The people who are behind this, they're not who you think they are. They've been manipulating your son for years. And now, they're going to destroy everything he's built." Her heart raced as she listened. What was he talking about? Who were these people? What had been going on behind the scenes? It all sounded like a terrible dream, but she couldn't ignore the gravity in his voice. He handed her a file, a collection of documents that detailed some of the darkest secrets of the airline. Inside, she found evidence of corporate sabotage, illegal deals, and hidden alliances that she never could have imagined. The airline her son had built was being used as a pawn in a much larger game, and her son was nothing more than a piece on the chessboard. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her son had been manipulated from the very beginning. She stared at the file, her mind racing. The man's words echoed in her ears. They're going to destroy everything. The weight of the situation bore down on her, and for the first time, she understood the full extent of the danger. Her son wasn't just facing a business crisis. He was facing a personal one, too. He had been played, used, and now he was on the verge of losing everything. With each passing day, the tension continued to build. The stakes grew higher, the mystery deeper, and the danger closer. She knew that her son had to be protected. But how could she save him when he was so deeply entrenched in this mess? And more importantly, how could she confront him with the truth without destroying everything he had worked so hard for? As the days dragged on, she began to see the full scope of the web of lies that had been spun around her. Her son wasn't just a victim in this story. He had played a role in it too. The choices he had made, the alliances he had formed, had all led to this point. She was no longer just a mother looking out for her son. She was now an active participant in a battle for control, not just of an airline, but of her family's future. She had to decide. Would she continue to protect her son from the truth, or would she confront him with the devastating reality that everything he had built was about to come crashing down? The stakes had never been higher. The mystery was far from over. And the final twist, the one that would change everything, was still waiting to be uncovered. The question now was whether or not they could stop it before it was too late. The truth was a heavy burden to carry, especially when it was far darker and more twisted than anything she had ever imagined. As she pieced together the final fragment of her investigation, the weight of the conspiracy around her son's airline became undeniable. The entire empire her son had worked tirelessly to build was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated game, and he, unfortunately, was one of the pawns. But what hurt more than the deceit was the realization that he had been part of it, a willing participant. At least, initially, she had always thought of him as a hero of his own story, the one who had fought tooth and nail to make a name for himself, to rise from the rubble of obscurity, to being one of the most influential figures in the airline industry. But now, the narrative was much darker. The people behind the scenes, the ones who had always been just a whisper in the background, were more powerful than she could have ever guessed. They had strings attached to her son, controlling him like a puppet on a wire. He wasn't just unaware of his own downfall. He was a part of the scheme that would ultimately destroy him. The final pieces clicked into place when she found herself sitting across from him. He had been distant for weeks, avoiding her calls and dodging any attempts at confrontation. But that evening, something changed. The tension in the air was palpable as she stared into his eyes, searching for the son she once knew, the son who had trusted her with everything. And there he was, sitting before her, looking almost like a stranger. The man who had once been full of ambition and drive now seemed defeated, drained by the weight of the secrets he had been hiding for so long. She couldn't help but feel sorry for him, even as her anger bubbled just beneath the surface. The time had come. She couldn't protect him anymore. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the confrontation, the moment when everything would be laid bare. "I know what's been going on," she said softly, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. His eyes widened for a split second before he quickly masked his expression with a practiced indifference. But she could see the fear in his eyes, the fear of being exposed. "I know about the takeover, about the people pulling your strings. I know about the manipulation, the lies, and the deals you've made." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His silence spoke volumes. She had him, and he knew it. She had finally found her way through the web of deceit that had ensnared him. The truth was no longer something they could dance around. It was out there in the open, undeniable and irreversible. "I never wanted you to get caught in this," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I was in too deep. They offered me too much. I thought I could control it, but they had me from the start." His hands trembled as he looked down at the table, unable to meet her gaze. "I thought it was just a business deal, just another step up, but it wasn't. It never was." His voice cracked with the weight of regret, and now it's all falling apart. His confession hung in the air like an unbearable truth. She had always known he was capable of so much, but to hear him admit his failure, his own guilt, was something she wasn't sure she could handle. Yet, despite the pain, she knew there was no turning back. They had come this far, and now they had to face the consequences together. But just as she was about to speak, to offer him some semblance of comfort or guidance, something unexpected happened. The door to the room opened, and in stepped someone she least expected to see. It was a family friend who had handed her the file weeks ago, the same person who had been warning her about the danger lurking in the shadows. But this time, he wasn't the ally he had appeared to be. His eyes were dark with something more dangerous than she had ever seen, and in his hand was a piece of paper, one that seemed to carry more weight than any document she had ever encountered. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and ominous. "You're not the only one who's been played. All of you are just pawns in this game. The real mastermind behind everything, behind your son's downfall, is someone you never would have expected." He tossed the paper onto the table, and her heart skipped a beat as she saw the name at the top, her own name. Her mind raced as she processed the implications. How could this be? How could her name be tied to the scheme? She wasn't a part of this. She was just trying to help, trying to save her son. But as the pieces fell into place, she realized the unimaginable. She had been manipulated from the very beginning. Her family friend, the one who had seemed so trustworthy, had known this all along. He had been playing her, guiding her, using her to lead her son into the trap. And now, with everything collapsing around them, he was revealing the final twist in the game. She was the one who had been set up as the fall guy. She was the one they would blame when it all came crashing down. Her son's eyes widened as he looked at the paper, his face pale. "How could you?" he whispered, the shock in his voice palpable. "How could you let this happen? After everything?" She stared at the paper, the evidence of her own involvement in the conspiracy, and for the first time, she realized how deep the betrayal ran. This wasn't just about protecting her son anymore. It was about saving herself. She had been too trusting, too naive to see the truth, and now the game had changed. She was no longer just fighting for her son's future. She was fighting for her own, with the revelation of her own entanglement in the plot. Everything started to unravel faster than she could comprehend. The power players behind the scenes were closing in, and they had no intention of letting anyone walk away unscathed. The airline was on the verge of collapse, and they would stop at nothing to ensure the control over it. But there was one final move left, one final twist that no one saw coming. In a moment of clarity, she realized that the only way out was to confront the very people who had been pulling the strings all along. She and her son would have to come together, face the truth, and take down the people responsible. But even that would come at a cost. There was no clean escape from this. The only way out was to play their own game, to outsmart the masterminds and turn the tables on them. They would have to use every ounce of their strength, their intellect, and their will to survive. In the final, intense moments of the confrontation, the last unexpected twist came when the family friend, the one who had been the true mastermind behind it all, turned on the very people who had been his partners in crime. It was his betrayal that shifted the balance of power, allowing her and her son to seize control of the situation. But even as they emerged victorious, the cost was clear. The damage was done. The people they had once trusted were gone, and the life they had known would never be the same. As the dust settled, she sat with her son, their future uncertain, but free from the web of deceit that had nearly destroyed them. The lessons they had learned were painful, but they were invaluable. They were no longer the same people who had started this journey, and they knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But they were ready to face whatever came next. The experience had shown them the true value of trust, resilience, and the strength to overcome even the darkest of challenges. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of inner strength and resilience. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.